Everyone. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. So glad to see you all. I'm Patti Sherman-Cisler. I'm the Executive Director with the Jewish Museum Milwaukee. And it's really my pleasure tonight to welcome you to tonight's presentation, one of the programs in our critical conversation starters, the evolving role and the impact of the philanthropic organizations in the Milwaukee area. This program is done in conjunction with our current exhibit, Luba Lukova, Designing Justice. Thanks to our major sponsors, Karen and Joel Quadracci, the Argosy Foundation, Wisconsin Arts Board, Milwaukee Arts Board, many other donors, and of course to our members. I ask for your patience with any technical glitches tonight. If you happen to have some, please just put it in our chat, which is at the bottom of your screen, and someone from our staff will attempt to help you. Also, we are looking for questions this evening. So if you have any, also please put it in the chat box, and we will share that with our panelists. If you're on Facebook, submit your questions in the comments section, and same thing, we will monitor that and share it with our panelists. To get the best viewing experience tonight, please view the program in speaker view, and you can do that by going up to your right-hand corner and pressing that view. Many of you have already donated to tonight's program, so thank you so much for your support. If you would still like to donate, we will put a donation option in the chat box at the end of the program. We are so pleased to offer this program tonight. The philanthropic community in Milwaukee were in many ways the leaders in providing resources to the greater Milwaukee area due to the pandemic, civil unrest, and long simmering social justice issues. Our sincere thank you to all of them as we explore what has been done, where we are, and next steps. Now let me introduce our moderator and panelists for the evening. First, Molly Dubin, who is our moderator for the evening. She is the longtime curator with the Jewish Museum Milwaukee and the coordinator of this program. Thank you, Molly. And Nicole, please correct my pronunciation if I'm wrong. Angresano is the Vice President of Community Impact at United Way of Milwaukee and Waukesha County. She joined United Way in 2007 after years of direct service and research in the social services and public health sectors. Welcome, Nicole. Ian Bautista is the Senior Director of Civil Engagement for the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, a role that he's held since March of this year. He's worked in the community development field for his entire career at the local, state, and national levels. Frank Cumberbatch is a father, husband, coach, foundation executive, and community cheerleader. He is currently the Vice President of Engagement at Bader Philanthropies, a private global foundation headquartered in the Harambe neighborhood of Milwaukee. His purpose is to help people to become the best version of themselves. Miryam Rosenzweig is President and CEO of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation. She previously led the Federation of Metropolitan Detroit's organization Philanthropic Advancement Team as Chief Development Officer. She oversaw all fundraising and resource development. She was the founder of Next Gen Detroit, a groundbreaking initiative that had influenced communities across the country to engagement of young populations. So thank you all, four of you, for joining us this evening. Now I'd like to turn over the screen to our curator, Molly Dubin.
Thanks so much, Patti. I am so excited to be with everyone this evening. Let's see. I'm trying to get myself into a speaker view here. Let's see. Hopefully I'll come onto the screen. So as Patti mentioned, we have an incredibly esteemed panel with us this evening. We are exploring the role of philanthropy in 2020. Philanthropy has always played an incredible role in our community. They provide essential services, but that is something that really has evolved in the wake of the pandemic and civil unrest that we have been experiencing. And that has led to some incredibly exciting means of collaboration and innovation, and hopefully some preparation in terms of moving these exciting initiatives forward and applying them as we move forward as a community and continue to grapple with everything that is going on. So it's going to be difficult, I understand, to really kind of contain everything that is so essential to talk about this evening. But what I'd love to start off with is having each of you talk a little bit about the mission of your particular organization. And that would include, maybe highlighting some of your major programs, but also any, changes to your programs or funding priorities in light of the pandemic, civil unrest, and economic challenges currently facing our region. So if it's okay, I think I'm going to start with Ian. The reason being is that Ian he was really the moderator, the convener of the Civic response team, which we'll talk more about for Milwaukee. So Ian, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Greater Milwaukee Foundation and what you've been doing since you've been there?
Great, thank you so much, Molly. And thanks to the Jewish Museum of Milwaukee for hosting us and gathering us all together tonight. So the Greater Milwaukee Foundation and my colleagues who may be listening in who've worked there far longer than me will have to forgive me and correct me later. But we are Milwaukee's community foundation. For those who may not be familiar with the model, we work with longtime Milwaukeeans, sometimes short-time Milwaukeeans and their families to be able to invest their wealth in ways that are doing good in the community. And then we also have the ability to make grants ourselves, and we engage in civic leadership and influence work. So the way that looks, for example, is like under the work that's with my purview. When the pandemic hit, the folks at the foundation turned to me and some of our colleagues that are also panelists tonight and said, hey, I think we need to respond to this. So the philanthropic side of the house at the foundation started first and foremost with our board of directors, but also with other key civic leaders, corporate, philanthropic, et cetera, and started to raise some dollars that were aggregated into what is known as the MKE Response Fund, which is a pool of dollars and multiple millions of dollars to be able to respond to organizations in the community that were facing hardship and just needs based on the pandemic. Then in the wake of the pandemic, the economic hardship and other racial unrest and civic unrest that was happening in the city. But then we, to complement that effort with my team, started to work with Milwaukee Succeeds, which is an operating collective impact entity within the purview of the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, with Nicole's good help and team, with Frank, and then many, many others who are far too numerous to name, to lift up what's called, as you mentioned, Molly, the Civic Response Team. That really came in response to Mayor Barrett and some of the leaders on his staff at the city explaining to us in Philanthropy what they were seeing really in that first week of the Safer at Home order, what they saw as the urgent needs and opportunities in the community. And so we worked with a whole host of civic leaders to start up 6 operating teams that focused in on early childhood care and education, on K-12 education, on food and food systems, on shelter and housing, on physical health, and then on mental health. And I won't steal the thunder of Nicole or Frank, who work in the shelter and the mental health teams as their leaders. But we try to coordinate a response of organizing not just financial resources from philanthropy, but also civic influence resources, which is why we have outstanding leaders like them that we recruited to the effort and work with in partnership to influence other civic leaders, other organizations that have resources, whether those are financial or human, to be able to really mobilize and organize by understanding what the problems were and the challenges in those areas, but also what some of the opportunities are, especially since the pandemic and the economic downturn have really exposed and shine a really bright light on some of the racial and other social inequities. So I'll stop there so that I don't just keep on going. But
that's a wonderful introduction, Ian, and actually a great framework for our discussion. So with that, Nicole, can you tell us a little bit about the United Way and some of its major programs in connection with its mission and some of the changes that have been going on of late in response to current issues?
Absolutely. Thank you, Molly. And I just want to echo Ian's gratitude for the invitation to be here with you tonight, for the invitation to share what I think is really an unprecedented level of collaboration between funders in this community, which has really been gratifying, and I think something that I look forward to sustaining well beyond these difficult times that we're in now. So Ian did a beautiful job describing the setup of the initiative. I'll just briefly mention sort of what United Way's day job is, which is that year-round, we move human and financial capital towards addressing the community's most critical needs. We do that through investments in over 220 health and human service programs spanning our 4-county region of Milwaukee, Waukesha, Washington, and Ozaukee County. We engage in giving, advocacy, and volunteerism. So like Ian said, and like I want to say, human and financial capital both being directed towards collective impact and collective lifting of communities. Some of our core issues and strategies right now include Milwaukee Community Schools, where we have leadership within 12 Milwaukee public schools to drive equity in that direction, to make sure that every kid has a great school, regardless of what zip code they're in. We support safe and stable homes and eviction prevention and long-term housing stability initiative. We support reducing barriers to employment with a particular focus on African Americans in the Central City, who are faced and burdened with, in addition to the regular and traditional burdens that people have in general, then layer on that the burden of inequity, and now layer on that again the burden of COVID. This is a very, very difficult time for job seekers in our community. And I'm very, very proud that we are entering the 15th year of our cornerstone initiative, Teen Pregnancy Prevention, which is actually what brought me to United Way in the first place. And so while we are excited to talk about Milw, all of the funders on this call have longstanding commitments to the ongoing needs of our community as well. And so very happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Nicole. Frank, Bader Philanthropies, talk to me a little bit about your mission, programs, and changes in what you've been doing in terms of working together.
Sure. Well, as my colleagues started out, I will continue that by saying it is indeed an honor to be here with staff of the museum, with supporters of the museum, supporters of our city, to share what this team has been doing. If you are from Milwaukee or you've been in Milwaukee for a while, you would know that Bader Philanthropies is actually 28 years old. From the beginning, we were known as the Helen Bader Foundation. Then we changed to Bader Philanthropies. But the mission hasn't really changed that much. It's It is still to thrive to be a philanthropic leader in improving the quality of life of the diverse communities in which we work. We work here in Milwaukee, we work in Wisconsin. Of course, we do a lot of work in Israel and the Czech Republic. And we're very proud of the work we do all over the world. We support, because of Helen, Alzheimer's and aging is still at the top of the list. We support the arts, young people, of course, the workforce. We're very, very supportive of. And but then the pandemic hit, and our fearless leader, Dan Bader, quickly moved us to action to support the organizations that do such great work in the city. We have a rather rigid process by which organizations apply for grants, but we quickly pivoted to sort of setting that aside for the moment and putting the focus on keeping those organizations going to serve the community. While doing that, I was indeed honored to be added to this esteemed team called the Civic Response team, and I really echo what Ian and Nicole has said, that this team has been so collaborative, working so well together, so committed to taking Milwaukee to the next level, that we feel it's imperative that this team stays together to see how else we can support our city going forward. So that's what we've been up to.
That's fantastic, Frank. Fantastic. So now I'm going to turn to Miryam, who has not only been in conversation with all of these organizations in terms of the greater community effort, but also in her role as president and CEO of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation and responding to the needs of the Jewish community at this difficult time. So Miryam, can you talk to us a little bit about what you have been working on in terms of this collaboration on a larger community level, and some of the initiatives that you have been working on that are so critical to help us on our way to recovery?
Thank you. First of all, I think it's unfair to ever have to follow Frank, because he has a voice that was meant to be speaking out loud, and he sounds wise just when he says his name, let alone when he speaks. I am I think the newest Milwaukeean on the call, and I couldn't be prouder to be here with my colleagues and with the Milwaukee Jewish Federation to talk about this important subject. The Milwaukee Jewish Federation's mission is to take care of the needs of the Jewish community and build a vibrant Jewish future in Milwaukee, Israel, and around the world. And that's what we always say out loud, but we actually have a second part of that mission, which is to act in the interest of tikkun olam. And tikkun olam is often described as acts of kindness or doing good in the world. And I want to just take 1 minute to say that I've researched where the word tikkun olam comes from. It's a Hebrew phrase, and everyone always uses it as social justice. And it actually comes from, 2,000 years ago, where it talks about Jewish law. And tikkun olam is actually a set of laws on how to treat the most vulnerable in your community. And tikkun olam means in Hebrew, in the interest of public policy. And so it's the notion that as you talk about religion, you also have to talk about how do you care about your most vulnerable, not just in your community. And in fact, it goes out of its way to give examples in the Mishnah of how you have to apply it to the most vulnerable, whether they're Jewish or not. And so while the Federation was created to build these organizations, most of our organizations are serving the greater Milwaukee community. Organizations like the JCC, Jewish Family Services, where probably 95% of their clients aren't Jewish, and some that are specifically targeted to the Jewish community. And when I say that our goal is to ensure a vibrant Jewish future, it's how do we make sure that there is a Jewish community here that wants to be here. When I think about this, I have to say the civic response team, I actually called up Ian and I was like, how do we get to be a part of this? Because it was an amazing concept. Let's bring all the funders together. And while the Jewish community through the Federation was focused on how do we ensure that our community and our organizations are sustained, we wanted to make sure that we were not only coordinating with the largest effort in the city, but that we were also not doing the same things that they were doing, and then actually doing the opposite of the intention, which was to maximize resources. So we looked at what are our core competencies, and it is raising dollars in a collective way, planning community-wide, and collaboration. And one of the initiatives I want to share was really this notion that we are focused on how do you maximize resources? How do you make sure that philanthropy is being utilized at its best? And we did that in several ways, and I want to highlight two. One is when the PPP loans came out. So take yourself back to the first stimulus check. This was like about 900 months ago. And they announced this amazing small business loan. And it was the wild, wild west. Nobody knew what was going on. The banks didn't know, the people applying didn't know. There were no rules and they just dumped it. And what we looked at and we said was the notion that we can raise dollars from federal funds that would help the community would be the most essential. And so one of the initiatives that we did was that we hired a consultant to work with any organization that called us and said, we need help because most nonprofit organizations don't have the robust financial team behind their back to be able to do this. We know that in the first round, we helped 46 organizations across Wisconsin, not just across Milwaukee, bring in about $10 million. In the second round of the PPP loans, we opened it up to small businesses because we realized that the same issue of not being able to access resources to do this was happening in small businesses just as much as it was happening in nonprofits. The second one was creating a memo that in the beginning was going out every day. In the beginning of the pandemic, there was no centralized memo with what is happening locally, nationally, and globally. I mean, it's crazy now because we see it on the screen every day, but in the first month, there just wasn't that. And so we started by having someone on our staff stop what they were doing and just focus on being an intelligence officer. Let's collect the information and send it out. By the end of the first month, the governor's office was getting it, the health departments were getting it, many of you on this call were getting it, and it got to the point where we need to do it. But the idea is, how do we make sure that while we're talking about philanthropy and while we're talking about collaboration, that we maximize every resource and we connect the dots in between so that not everybody is just taking care of themselves. And I'm really proud that the Milwaukee Jewish Federation has led in that area and has gotten to collaborate with so many who are on this call.
Fantastic, Miryam. Thank you so much. And I love the background on Tikkun Olam and the origins of that, which of course, that really speaks to the overarching theme of this conversation. It's all about coming together to repair, to figure out how we can help one another. And I really love the fact that you talked about the fact that way back when, which it does. I mean, it's just kind of unreal to me when I think about when we all first kind of started talking about doing this program. In many ways, it seems like, decades ago, because there's been just such rapid fire change. We're constantly having to keep on top of that, and when you say that there really was no, it was the Wild West, there was no playbook. That really is at the heart of why this, unprecedented collaborative effort was so important. I mean, philanthropies, we know, are already at the forefront of identifying some of the greatest needs in our communities, some of the fundamental needs. And when that was amplified in many ways, it made sense to tap the leaders of philanthropic organizations to head up strategic thinking and coordinated plans and really look at these different areas. When we were, kind of prepping for this, we talked about previously, working in silos. And as Frank said, so aptly, all that was kind of put aside, and it was just recognized, this is what needs to happen. It needs to happen fast. Let's cut through red tape. Let's get done what needs to be done. So Ian, I'm going to turn back to you again. We just talked about going back to the beginning, and you really were thrown into the fire with this, having started in March. So can you talk to us a little bit about that when we, think about funders being the first responders, which of course we talked about already being there, but now even more so. And that void that was filled in being able to collaborate in such an unprecedented way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was literally my second week at the foundation. So I worked a week in the office, and then that Friday, my boss said, "Hey, guess what? You got to work from home." And then, midweek that next week, we started this work. So I've known nothing at the foundation but pandemic, economic recession, and response work, which is great because it's given me the opportunity to get to know the folks on the panel here. And I would say just a little bit different, Molly, than what you described. Really, the folks that are the closest to what's happening and what the urgent needs are some of the grantees that we have that are in community very intimately, especially community organizers and folks that are on the ground every day. The first or second after family number that people call when they have a vital question about where resources are, or where there's an emergency happening and they need to know the answer to how do they solve this issue in their neighborhood or their community. And so we have tried wherever we can to kind of incorporate those who are doing the work as integrally as we can in the effort on each one of the teams. And I described the 6 first teams, but we've created since then, and probably about 2 months into the process, optimistically looking ahead, but also realistically looking around us at the dire need for economic help and recovery. We created the economic recovery team too, and so they've kind of taken up the planning and the response effort in that area around jobs, around holding ground on home ownership, and coordinating with Nicole's team around holding ground on housing stability and trying to prevent evictions and work through some of the just really basic support that households need to just keep their rent paid or keep their mortgages paid, keep food in the pantry, and just live, accessing education and health services, et cetera, as virtually as they can. The work has really ranged. You would think that at a foundation and at this level that we would be making the major decisions about resources and allocating them and that type of thing. And this might cause Nicole to laugh a little bit, but I mean, we quickly became logistics managers and had to figure out how to get a vast quantity of hand sanitizer into a central location. And I mean, Nicole and her team really kind of took this on and found people that knew how to do this. To take 55-gallon drums of hand sanitizer, put them into bottles that are packageable and consumable by childcare centers, by food pantries, by schools, other nonprofits, and then a way to have volunteers and others disseminate those and figure out how to dispatch. So we did that, with that effort. We also did that with masks. There was a very generous effort that came to us by Rebel Wipes, a company up in Saukville, that committed to providing about 4 million kits or 4 million mask kits to make the masks and to get them out in the community. Of course, everybody needed masks. So we kind of put our heads together and figure out, okay, so we take this organization and this facility, Pfizer Forum, and these folks over here, and United Way recruit some volunteers, then we can get them allocated to be able to get out into the community and make sure that we're meeting this vital need. So there were efforts that we didn't necessarily see ourselves as having expertise in, that we just kind of rolled up our sleeves and figured out a way to make it happen. And we keep doing that as much as we can from week to week and from month to month.
Yes. And, as you so aptly said, it's also about, working closely with the funders, seeing who has what resources, figuring out how to best direct those resources. So that really goes along with, kind of working, boots on the ground. You're rolling, you just said, you rolled your sleeves up, doing things you may not normally do. That being said, many of these issues are part of all of your organization's missions. Have those issues changed at all, or in identifying what the pressing issues were? Was there a shift at all in that, or an emphasis? And how is that determined? Nicole, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I think to everyone's point, all of the other panelists have said this, but it bears repeating, which is that none of these are new conditions. COVID's a new condition, but we have community members who live in COVID all the time, right? It might not seem contagious, it doesn't require masks. We have folks who are on the precipice of economic catastrophe every single day. And so for the funders on this phone call or on this Zoom call today, that's what we do year round. But I think what it did was, I think, force us to be bolder and faster. You heard Frank say, and he said it about Bader, I'll say it about United Way. We're not always the fastest car on the racetrack to pivot, right? So we have a board of directors, we have committees, we got to talk things through, we got to do a needs assessment, then we got to go see, what other people think about it too. And we have been able to move more quickly than ever. We've been able to fund partners that quite frankly, in the past wouldn't have met sort of the United Way guidelines, the checklist for how big is their board, how much cash do they have on hand, all of those things that we do to analyze and evaluate. And I'm glad that we do that, right? It's not my money. We're stewarding the community's money. But I'm really hoping that what you're going to see there is a shift in that you're going to see folks like Metcalf Park Community Bridges and the other boots on the ground people that we just literally gave diapers and cash and food to and let them do what they do. The second issue I wanted to raise as something that actually is new and has been top of mind for certainly for the civic engagement, civic response team, is the issue of the technology gap. And so United Way has worked, has seen, and nobody on this call is oblivious to this, particularly if you have kids at home right now who are going to school. We need to have computers and internet access just to do our jobs and just for our kids to do the basic. I mean, I don't want him to hear me, but like the basic level in school right now that we're trying to get done here. We have a lot of families that don't have that access. They don't have computers. They don't have Wi-Fi. And so United Way started an initiative called Techquity, which is just a blending of technology and equity. It's not that fancy, to make sure that school children, employees, agency staff, that everybody has it. And Frank and Ian and I were on a call this morning, and we all said it very clearly. Internet service is no longer a luxury item. It is a necessity. It is a basic utility. And as a community, we want to make sure that it's treated as such. And so that's something that I think we weren't unaware of it, but has certainly gotten more legs because of this pandemic and because of the work we've all done together.
That's great. So Frank, since Nicole kind of mentioned the focus on technology, I know you had a particular focus on working with mental health, correct?
Well, to be clear, they threw me into mental health. I don't know if I had much choice, but I embraced it. It was great.
So, and again, we've said these are all issues that exist in our community that may have been amplified or slightly involved in some way. Can you talk to us about that particular role for you?
Well, I'll take back a little bit of what I just said. They didn't actually throw me. I am one of the founding members of SWIM, which is Scaling Wellness in Milwaukee, which is an organization that was created to address the trauma that we recognize exists in our communities every day. So, as Nicole said, COVID-19 may have just shown up, but we know our neighbors live with these stressors every day. We know the anxiety. We know some of the abuse that they're under. whether it's from their own families, from the system, or whatever you want to say about it. So we quickly understood that it is going to be a spiral to the bottom for many families. The African American community, especially on the low income side, is led by women, African American women who work on the front lines, who cannot do their jobs on a computer via Zoom. They have to go to work and interact with human beings in the midst of this virus. They have to go home. Sometimes it's just 2 rooms in the home. And they have to share that space with 1 bathroom with their grandmother and a baby. That's a lot of stress for any human being to be under. And so we quickly recognize that we have to focus on people's mental health. Now, added on to that, as Ian talked about, what Nicole quickly remedied was people became paralyzed about this virus. There was so much miscommunication going on in the marketplace that you could get it this way or that way. And so people wouldn't come outside to go to the grocery store. We didn't have enough masks to deliver to them for them to be safe to come outside. They wanted cleaning supplies and didn't know how to get it. And so we just had to act as fast as we can to remedy the situation, to get them to settle down, so we can act. Let me also make one more comment about mental health and this whole team. I think this is the first time in my professional life that I was working on something that was directly affecting me personally at the same time. The first 28 people to die in COVID in Milwaukee were all African Americans. 10 were my friends. And so I have to wake up every morning, pick up the paper, read my friends' names in the newspaper while joining this team and keep my wits about me representing this foundation to do service for the community. That was the very first time in my life that I understood clearly why we are doing what we are doing. And so when you're running on adrenaline, as an athlete, I know the value of that. So I just had to use it in my favor to deliver the work that I had to do with my colleagues for the community.
The insight is great in terms of your thinking and how you were approaching all of this and where you were with it in approaching it. So, we talked about that this recovery team, some of you had different areas of focus. Miryam, as kind of looking at an entire, community, a Jewish community within the greater Milwaukee community, you were looking at, all of these issues really, and working with different organizations, to address that. Were there some changes in your thinking about how best to really identify and bring some initiatives, some responses to these things that we're talking about, like mental health, access to technology, food, housing, all of these fundamental issues that were amplified?
Again, I have to follow Frank, so thanks. But I will say that the Jewish community represents a microcosm of the work of the greater community. And while some of our challenges aren't as deep, they touch each area. So we had the issue of technology early on. The Jewish community that's in the Sherman Park area really did not have access to computers at home, had very large families, didn't have access to do online learning. And so one of the first things that we did was actually meet with the principals and the leaders of that community, which is a religious community, and talked about the importance of getting ready now. And I think the biggest thing that I would say that was a shift was the Federation taking in this new role of preparedness, helping organizations understand what is coming to them. Because as I said, we were doing the research, what's happening in countries that were 3 weeks ahead of us, 3 months ahead of us, so that we could predict it. I think that in the Jewish community specifically, early on, we didn't see the issues of food and shelter. What we did see was families breaking down. What we did see was the predominantly middle-class family not have the resources. And as Frank was talking about mental health, if we think about families with working parents who have children who are online learning, they were really, really struggling. And so part of our work was to look and identify issues that are coming up. The second was to look at the entire Jewish community and say, how can we bring people together? Again, modeling a lot of what we saw with the Greater Milwaukee Civic Engagement Group, Civic Response Group, and addressing those issues together. My biggest concern is not what we've done, and it's not will we get through the next 6 months. My biggest concern is what Frank touched about, which is the mental health of an entire global system that's going to have PTSD or that already has it. And when we, the conversation that we're having right now is, what does resiliency look like? And there's a lot of judgment when you talk about resiliency. Well, this person has it worse than this person. But the reality is it actually depends on where your starting point is and what you're coming across. And so what I'm concerned about is, how do we make sure that we don't just address the needs right now, but that when we come out of this, we have a healthy enough community, not the Jewish community, the Milwaukee community, so that we can come back and be together in how we work, in how we help, in how we come together. And as someone who, again, is new to Milwaukee, the coming together, whether it's festivals and in parks and outdoors. One of my favorite things about Milwaukee is I say, I've lived in cold weather before, but Milwaukee is the only one that says, listen, it's cold, deal with it, put on a coat and get outside for 10 months, which is amazing. And now I've moved into a new home and I don't know who my neighbors are, which feels very much like when I lived in New York, but it's traumatizing because I'm going to live in my place for possibly a year without really getting to know it. So I think that there's a lot that is happening now that could prepare us for for the second wave that we're going to have to deal with. And I think that mental health is going to be up there, and it's going to range from the areas that we talk about, which is a serious morbidity that we can see, to the more subtle areas where people are struggling and can't even vocalize why that is.
That's great. And actually a perfect segue to kind of my last question for all of you, which is a compound question. And then we want to definitely give our audience a chance to pose some questions. You talked about, preparedness, realizing that there was some lack of preparedness. And that's something we talked about across the board. So in thinking about that, what are some of the lessons that we've learned or that you have learned in terms of moving forward that we can look to apply to the future, so maybe we don't find ourselves in such a state of ill preparedness, and in looking towards a time when we get back to some sense of normalcy, what additional challenges do you foresee with that? So again, I'll kind of circle back to Ian.
Wow, I wish I had the answer to that question, but I think it does go back to what Miryam was just talking about with resilience. I mean, we have to get to the place where we're not afraid necessarily of what is to come, but that we know that since we've survived things before, that we can survive them again, or we can survive something that's morphing into something that we didn't experience in the past, but we can have the mechanisms and the strategies to be able to work through them. And I mean, I take a lot of inspiration when I think about the millennia, right, of resiliency of the Jewish community. I think all of us could learn quite a bit, you know, from our Jewish brothers and sisters about what it really means to survive and to thrive and to, you know, come together as a community to seek strength together. I will tell you that I think that some of the toughest challenges that are ahead of us are already with us. And we can look no further than just this past week of the election and some of the division and difference in perspectives that we have as a community, just right here in the state of Wisconsin, or right here in this metropolitan area in Milwaukee. You know, racial inequities and, you know, just vast differences of how we perceive and how we move through and live in a reality that is different from Brookfield to Sherman Park, or from, you know, Clark Square on the south side to Mequon, right? And I really do look with great anticipation, you know, like Miryam was saying, to the time that we can gather together again and be in common spaces. But I think we have to challenge ourselves once, you know, there is a sense of public health all clear, to go outside of that kind of sphere of safety that we typically go to, and challenge ourselves to go into places that aren't the places that we went to before, so that we can get to know people who are very different and have a very different life experience than what we have, and not just for the novelty of it, but to really get to know their humanity and really get to know what their triumphs and their struggles and their aspirations are. And I think we would find that they're not, you know, completely different than what we hope for and that what we strive for with our families, right? But I know that I, you know, just speaking for myself, have a lot of work to do to better appreciate others' perspectives. And I really look forward to that time where we can, you know, go back to festivals and to parks and to places where we can be together. I'm, you know, an affectionate person. I miss giving hugs. I miss receiving hugs. I miss, you know, family members who are vulnerable in their health. But I also know that I'm seriously looking at, you know, the governor's order, executive order that he just issued today. And I'm going to heed those warnings because I care about those people that I already know, but those that I have yet to meet. I want them to be there. I want them to be alive. I want them to be healthy. So I'm going to heed those warnings and heed those orders.
Great, thank you, Ian. Nicole, same question to you. You know, lessons about preparedness and looking, you know, to the future.
Yeah, so two things. One is an absolute rejection of the return to normal narrative, right? Which is that, like Ian and we said, which is, I'm not interested in returning to normal. I'm interested in being better. And if there is a silver lining, if there are threads of silver that we can pull from this, it's how can we be better as people, as philanthropists, as a community. And I really want to hold on to that because so often we have these, you know, I was thinking about, it's happened with 9/11 and it's happened in smaller ways with hurricanes, right? We have this huge thing happen and there's this outpouring of support. And for a brief moment, we're all singing, you know, we're all singing songs on the Capitol steps and then we're done, right? And so what we're seeing here now is this like 8 months long hurricane. And I hope we don't go back to business as usual. I hope we are new and improved. And the second thing is I really want to say out loud and to hold ourselves accountable for is so many of the solutions that we've been implementing and discovering, we're all, everybody on this call is very smart people. I don't mean that, but I don't know anything that there's no magic here, right? This is a matter of will. This isn't a matter of skill or knowledge. This is, are we going to do this stuff? I watched Metcalf Park Community Bridges set up their own texting system so that when a person had a need, they could send a text and get what they needed. There is no reason we can't do that as a community, right? We sure were able to text during the election. Can we not do that better within the context of preparedness and social support and social cohesion? So mine is not going back to normal, but going forward bigger and better.
That's fantastic. Let's change it up a little bit. Miryam, same question to you.
You gave me a Frank reprieve. I appreciate it. So I would say if there's one thing that we could take about it is coming back to what the word community is really about. And when I think about these efforts, it's about thinking about each other and putting the notion of the collective being stronger than the individual. And, I think that is, as Ian said, like, and as Nicole said, like, we don't want to go back to normal. These conversations that are happening between people and between organizations have to continue on. But I think that this moment in time is also demanding that we think beyond ourselves, whether you're a philanthropist or whether you're a community member or whether you don't feel part of a community. It's how do we change that when that comes out? This past weekend, the Jewish community lost the global Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. And if you've heard me speak in the last 4 days, I've mentioned him in every speech because he was a giant of leadership. And he was the chief rabbi of England, and he was made a Lord because of his impact. And he wrote a book right before, that came out right before the coronavirus hit, called Morality, Restoring the Common Good in Divided Times. And he talks about the concept of going from being we-focused from me-focused to we-focused. And he talked to a group of students in March, and he said, all those people that are hoarding food and baby formula and toilet paper are engaging in the act of thinking of the me and not thinking of the we. And I think that is the lesson that we have to take away. And Ian referenced the resiliency of the Jewish community. And that's what made me think of this, because if I think about what has kept the Jewish community strong over 2,000 years of challenging issues, it's that community came first, the notion of the collective. If we take that away and we put that in, we care about our neighbors as much as we care about our lives, and our neighbors is a big crowd, then we will change the way our community works and how we interact with each other for the better. Now take that, Frank.
Exactly. I love that. And I love that Nicole put in the comment there in a response. We need more we, capital W-E. So Frank, the question to you.
I agree with all of my colleagues, and I'm so glad to hear them say we should not be going back. If we are to prepare for the future, we cannot let our children grow up and be uneducated. We cannot let chronic disease to just devastate any community. We cannot allow the substandard housing that people live in this community. And I think, if anything, this civic response team has demonstrated, I hope, to the greater community that if we band together, we can fix a lot of these problems. Right?
Yes.
And I want to end with this. In 1960, Haile Selassie said to the United Nations, until we stop judging each other by the color of our skin and the color of our eyes, there will be war. And we have to move forward, and this is 1960. We have to move forward by seeing each other as people, not labeled people, just people. And if we were to do that, I think all the work that's gone in this horrible, horrible pandemic that we're in, we will come out on the other end better for it. So I want to thank you and your team and everybody else for what you've allowed us to come and share with you today.
Well, thank you, Frank. And I want to thank all of our panelists. This has been so much food for thought. I mean, so informative, but so much food for thought, and really too, hopefully bringing some visibility to the incredible work that is collaboratively going on for the benefit of our community and uniting our community. So we had put in the chat that we wanted our audience to be able to ask questions. I think people are maybe just so overwhelmed with information they need to digest it and give it some thought. But I encourage you to get on your you're all on your computers anyway, but take a look at the websites of these organizations and and look at the the recovery team and the work that continues to go on. It's impressive in so many ways, and we're so appreciative of your being here, taking time away from the incredibly important, vital work that you all do. We can't help you enough. Thank you, excuse me, we can't thank you enough. And yes, we can't help you enough. We all should be helping. So with that, I want to also thank our audience for being with us this evening and for your thoughtful commentary and feedback as to what was being said during the course of the conversation. And we do have a question from Ian from Miryam. What's the rabbi's name that you just mentioned? Can you re-mention that? There
Yes,
it is, Jonathan.
I'll put, oh yeah, thank you, Moshe. It's Rabbi Laura Jonathan Sachs. And NPR has this phenomenal obituary if you look up at him. I do want to say one thing since I have the floor. This pandemic reminded us at a time when we were void of leadership, that leadership matters. And, we're talking about philanthropy, but it's each institution, it's the leaders in the community. I'm lucky to have Moshe Katz on this call. He's the chair of the board of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation. And when we started meeting, we were meeting every single day, 6 days a week, and he was on every one of those calls. And his biggest regret is that now we've gone down to the crisis team meeting once a week, and he only gets to be on those calls. But it makes a difference at a time when we were politically void of leadership, when we were fighting locally about laws, when we were talking about to have people in the community stand up and say, here's what's going to do. And I'm so proud to be with these panelists, with this community, and to be a part of it. So thank you for all of those who've led and who continue to lead in this space.
Thank you, Miryam. And as you have so aptly said, you all lead by example. You all lead by example, and we are, would all be, so honored to follow in that example, and we should. And with that, I know that many of you have donated to help support the programming that we do at the Jewish Museum Milwaukee. We appreciate that. If you haven't and you're able to, we appreciate anything that you contribute. And of course, we encourage contributions to all the organizations that we're talking here with this evening. With that, I'm just gonna do 2 quick shout outs. I'll encourage you to go to our website to check out some of our upcoming programming. One, a little bit of a virtual escape, but also edifying. The next in our Museum Passport series. It's our virtual Museum Passport series. We're going to be traveling to the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg on November 17th. Should be fascinating. So join us for a little virtual excursion there. And on November 22nd, continuing with our social justice theme, social justice story time, a welcoming table thinking about Native, refugee, and immigrant experiences. So look for more details on our website. And again, thank you to everyone for being with us this evening. Everyone should stay safe, be well, and keep each other in our thoughts, in everyone's thoughts. So thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Molly.